And Donald Trump has asked President Zelenskyy whether Ukraine would strike deep inside Russian territory if the US provided long-range weapons. That's according to the Financial Times newspaper, citing people briefed on the discussions. Trump has already announced plans to sell billions of dollars worth of US weapons, including Patriot missile systems and batteries, to European allies, who would then supply them to Ukraine. Patriot is one of the most modern air defense systems in the world. It can be used to intercept enemy aircraft as well as ballistic and cruise missiles. It can hit targets around 100 kilometers away and at altitudes of up to 30 kilometers. And for more, we can turn to our military expert, Marina Miron from King's College London. Marina, walk us through what we know about the new weapons that the US will supply to Ukraine.
Good day, Gerhard. Well, there are a lot of speculations. What we know for sure is that the U.S. has promised to deliver both Patriot air defense systems as well as interceptors. Allegedly, 17 systems are going to be delivered to Ukraine. We don't know anything about interceptors, and of course, we don't know anything about the timelines. But for the Trump administration, it was very important to make clear that the Europeans would be paying the bill for these systems.
Now, how do you see the prospects for Ukraine actually gaining the upper hand on the battlefields after Trump's announcement?
Well, the 17 Patriot systems are not going to substantially change the front lines, I'm afraid. Maybe they will help to defend against the likes of Iskander-M fired by the Russians, which is in conjunction to what is going on along the line of contact. However, it also depends where Ukraine will choose to put these systems, and most likely they will want to protect critical infrastructure. Therefore, I don't think that there will be major changes as far as the battlefield is concerned, unless there are deliveries of other weapon systems and other long-range munitions, such as ATACMS for Ukrainian HIMARS systems.
Speaking about other weapon systems, we've heard earlier the Financial Times is reporting that Donald Trump has asked Zelenskyy whether he could strike Moscow if the US provided those long-range missiles. How much of a game changer would that be, do you think?
Well, the first thing we need to take into account is why this information is being leaked now. Neither side has confirmed it. So for me, it is more of a diplomatic pressure on Russia. We have seen Trump threatening tariffs and now giving Putin 60 days. Which resulted in a lot of skepticism. Aside from the Russian side, ironically, a lot of Ukrainian commentators agree that 60 days or even 50 days, whatever it is too much time. And a lot of things can happen on the battlefield. That being said, if we take those statements at face value, there is a possibility, and that has been discussed, that a JASSM, so Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles, these are cruise missiles, would be supplied to Ukraine, and these cruise missiles would be fired from F-16 fighter jets. And so these missiles would give Ukraine the ability to strike far behind the enemy line, so conduct long-range strike on Russian territory. But again, this is all hypothetical because only 3 countries are operating them, Australia, Finland, and Poland. There are several versions of those, including the extended range one, which has a range of some 700 kilometers. The standard one is about 340, 350 kilometers, something along the lines. So it is not clear, and those are all speculations. And of course, speculation that Ukrainian Soviet-era fighter jets could be adapted to carry those missiles as well. So that could be something that the U.S. might provide. But again, right now, this is more of an informational bomb and a way to coerce Putin threatening to supply Ukraine with these weapons, because Ukraine could, of course, strike Moscow. And if the Western allies would give Ukraine the means, it is waiting for that permission. So the question that Trump allegedly posed to Zelenskyy is somewhat ironic.
Marina Miron there. Thank you very much, Marina.
Thank you for having me.
More, we are joined by Frank Ledwidge, a former UK military intelligence officer and current senior lecturer in strategic studies at Portsmouth University. He joins us from Oxford. How much of a difference do you think the supply of additional U.S. weapons that Trump has announced might make on the battlefield?
Well, good morning, sir. The weapons that have been headlined here, of course, the Patriot anti-aircraft missiles, which were touched on there. But there have been plenty of other systems which are very strongly rumoured, let's say, and some of them allegedly confirmed. Things like the HIMARS systems and multi-launch rocket systems, Hellfire, and above all, really, for the Ukrainians, a resumption of plentiful artillery supplies. So on the front line, when these weapons get through, which may take a little while, to return them to a position in terms of logistics, a little bit like it was earlier in the year before the Trump administration paused these supplies. That is to say, if the reports are true that these supplies are being recommenced or have been reauthorized.
Okay, and Frank, you know, we've all been seeing in these recent days and weeks the absolute barrage that has been coming from Russia, you know, missiles and drones. Talk with us a little bit about the systems that are being offered now, including the Patriot one. I mean, is this really the right one when we're talking about, you know, drone attacks, and how quickly you see it actually making a difference in helping secure Ukraine?
I don't see Patriots making a difference to the drone attack specifically, but it will make a difference to the damage being done by other Russian missile attacks, specifically ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles. Now, we don't know what mix they are at the moment, but you wouldn't be using those against the Garand drones. The problem for the Ukrainians is that it's the Garand drones, and that's the old Shahid missiles, the mopeds, as the Ukrainians, I think, call them, that have been causing a lot of trouble for the Ukrainians because they're coming in such large numbers, hundreds now, 600 on the night of the 12th, just a couple of days ago. And you wouldn't be using Patriots, wouldn't wisely be using Patriots against them. And what you need, as you heard before, really, is a layered air defense system with things like interceptor drones. The Ukrainians are absolutely the front end of developing those, gun systems, which they've already got, short-range missile systems, passive defenses, electronic warfare, and in the not-too-distant future, I think, directed energy too, but they are in the future. And that's a layered air defense system, which right now the Ukrainians are struggling with simply because of the sheer volume of Russian attacks. But they'll get there. The Patriots won't make too much of a difference to the drones, but they will make a difference to the high-value targets being prosecuted by Russian ballistic missiles.
Okay. So, I mean, we were talking about the defensive systems. You alluded to it a little bit before. The delivery of offensive weapons has not been announced, although there have been these reports that the president might do so. U.S. Secretary, U.S. NATO envoy is saying yesterday that nothing is off the table at this point. What sort of difference do you see offensive, long-range weaponry for Ukraine making in this war?
Well, symbolically, the weapon that most people have been talking about is called the Joint Air Standoff Missile, which would be probably put on the Ukrainian F-16s they've got, and maybe other aircraft as well, if they can be made compatible. And I think they could. The Ukrainians are very good at that. Now, that's a missile with a 1,000-kilometer range. Now, the problem with all of these is to make a real difference to the strategic output of Russia, you need thousands of such strikes. I won't go into the history of this, but essentially a few dozen here or there won't make a difference. But the issue here is symbolic. So American missiles attacking Russian strategic production facilities around Moscow would be a very significant uplift, let's say, in Ukraine's capability. In strategic terms, I doubt without many, many hundreds of them, which Ukrainians simply couldn't deploy, it wouldn't make a decisive difference. It's symbolic above all, I think.
Okay. Frank Ledwidge, senior lecturer in strategic studies at Portsmouth University. Thank you so much for that insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah.